Have you ever been watching a TV show in your language and then out of nowhere you hear Korean being spoken?
페이퍼 타올이 여기 있네.
뭐라고요?
Since you are learning Korean, this might have caught your ear, and if you're from Korea, you might already know that this line became unexpectedly famous here. Today, we're talking about some of the most famous and memorable Korean-speaking scenes in the American TV series Lost, or Lost in Korean, which started airing back in 2004. But first, why? Why are we making this video? Right now, with the ever-growing popularity of K-pop, and especially after hits like Squid Game and K-pop Demon Hunters, it's no longer uncommon to see a lot of people enjoying Korean songs and Korean language shows and movies. But even long before this K-content trend, there were some scenes in foreign movies and shows that became famous in Korea because people could hear Korean spoken in them. These scenes might not be so famous overseas, but many of these scenes naturally became online memes and topics of parody in many comedy shows and YouTube videos among Korean people. So as a culturally aware Korean learner, I think you will enjoy learning about this too. By the way, my name is Hyunwoo and you're watching Talk to Me in Korean. So today in this episode of what I hope we can turn into a series, let me know what you think. We are looking at Lost, the American TV show that aired between 2004 and 2010. Let's take a look at this scene first.
페이퍼 타올이 여기 있네.
뭐라고요?
자네 울장의 니신. 백. 회장님 밑에서 일하고 있지.
여태까지 나를 미행한 거야?
물론.
And if you haven't watched it yet, Lost is about 48 survivors of a mysterious plane crash who find themselves on a remote island that has a lot of secrets. And here, Daniel Dae Kim plays Kwon Jin-soo, a Korean man who only speaks Korean and then has to learn English to communicate with the others for his survival. Then why did these scenes from Lost become particularly famous in Korea? Well, in the early 2000s, with the internet and cable television being widely used and introduced, more and more American TV shows started gaining popularity in Korea, including Friends, 24, CSI, Desperate Housewives, and a little later on, Prison Break and The Big Bang Theory, and many more. And naturally, in these American shows, it was very, very rare to hear Korean being spoken in them. So everybody was pleasantly surprised by how much Korean was used in Lost, both by fluent speakers and not so fluent speakers. So the very fact that the actors delivered so many lines in Korean, even though they are not fluent, was enough to make these scenes really famous and popular in Korea. And as YouTube gained more traction, people started posting short clips and parodies on YouTube from this show, and these Korean-speaking scenes became even more well-known in Korea.
여태까지 나를 미행한 거야?
뭐지롱?
아무도 날 이해 못해. 난 한국만이라도 행복하고 싶은데 행복할 수가 없어.
So a few decades ago, when these American shows and movies were being produced, they probably didn't have access to a lot of actors who were native Korean speakers, and not many viewers were from Korea, so they probably didn't really pay much attention to the accuracy or the content of Korean being used. A really classic example of that was the Kentucky Fried Movie, which became famous in Korea for this particular scene.
오도 좀 주게.
여기 있어요.
한국말로 무조건 말하라니 한심하군. 우리 한국 사람이 들으면 정신 나갔다고 말할 게 아니야. 아무튼 하라니 할 수밖에 결과는 어떻든 간에 말이야. 이런 미국에서 영화 생활 할래니 한심하군 그래.
And this actor's name is Han Bong-soo, and he was Korean and he was a native speaker of the Korean language. He just said random and funny lines in that movie. He was actually the grandmaster and president of the International Hapkido Federation. Hapkido is a martial art. We began to see more Korean American actors breaking into Hollywood in a big way, and also more stories being told about immigrants and Korean diaspora families. Think of shows like Kim's Convenience, 김씨네 편의점, and films like Minari, Minari, Beef, 성난 사람들, which literally just means angry people, and Past Lives, which was titled as Past Lives in Korean too. In many of these cases, the directors and the producers themselves were also Korean American, so the portrayals of language and culture became much more accurate and authentic. And of course, when we talk about Lost, we can't skip over Daniel Dae Kim, who played Jin. He's the son of first-generation Korean immigrants, and he played a key role in expanding the representation of Korean American and Asian American actors in Hollywood. In fact, many say that he was one of the first Asian American men on mainstream American TV to be portrayed as strong, romantic, and attractive, which was actually different from older stereotypes. And even after Lost, he continued to stay active, not only as an actor, but also as a producer. And a fun fact that you probably already know is that he participated as the voice actor for the herbal clinic doctor in K-pop Demon Hunters.
Your tonics are ready!
Now, going back to the paper towel scene. This scene stood out to a lot of Koreans and it became really famous in Korea because the two actors were speaking in Korean for a long time, relatively long time, even though neither actor was a native speaker. And compared to English, which is spoken in so many different countries now with so many different various accents, Korean tends to have a very strict standard for what's considered to be the correct pronunciation or the natural pronunciation and intonation, since it's mainly spoken on the Korean peninsula, right? And that is why when we hear Korean spoken with a slightly different accent, it really just stands out. And sometimes native speakers may find it hard to understand. But here's the important thing. In real life, on the contrary, if you're a Korean learner and your pronunciation sounds a little bit different, it's not a problem. Nobody is going to make fun of you or think you are strange or anything like that. People will always just appreciate your effort to speak the language. So don't be afraid. Being understood and understanding the other person is much more important than sounding perfect, sounding exactly like a native speaker. And now, let's actually break down the Korean lines from this famous scene. But just to be clear, once again, I want to tell you that I'm not judging or making fun of the actor's Korean skills here. I'm just going to explain the lines to you and also introduce some useful information for you as a Korean learner. So at first, the guy in the Hawaiian shirt says these lines in English.
Could you hand me a paper towel there, bud? Paper towel, this one's broken.
And then Jin makes a gesture meaning that he doesn't speak English.
Oh, you don't speak English. Sorry.
But one small thing I find really interesting here is that the gesture right there, this one, it doesn't really look typically Korean to me. At least to me, it looked very American. It's not that common, I think. So in that case, what kind of gesture would a Korean character in that scene who really didn't speak any English use? What would I use? What kind of gesture? I would probably do something like this. 영어 못해요. Like that, not this. And with the following Korean parts, here's what I'll do. I'll play the original clip line by line and then repeat each line in my own voice. Maybe not try to act, but in my normal voice, how I would say it, and then introduce some key elements and fun details.
페이퍼 타올이 여기 있네.
뭐라고요?
If it were me, I would slightly change it to 페이퍼 타월 여기 있네, without the subject marker E. And here in 여기 있네, that 네 at the end expresses your discovery or acknowledgement. And then to that, Jin says, 뭐라고요? And I think this was really, really natural. Nothing else to say. Really great.
자네 울장이니신. 백. 회장님 밑에서 일하고 있지.
So let me try saying that. 자네의 장인이신 백 회장님 밑에서 일하고 있지. So, okay, this is the best that I can do. And this is where the sentences became really, really challenging for the actor. If I were to say the same line in a more natural Korean, maybe the best I can give you is 자네의 장인이신 백 회장님 밑에서 일하고 있지. Something like that, but in a real life conversation, I wouldn't even say the line as is because it's really dramatic and poetic. And the pause between 백 and 회장님, the unnecessarily long pause probably made it hard for Koreans to understand the sentence. Usually it's 백 회장님, like all connected, 백 회장님. And this word 자네 here too. 자네 is an old-fashioned or formal way to say you, often used by older men toward younger men. In my personal life, I have never ever used it, not even once. Other older Korean men have used it to me, but less than 10 times in my entire life.
여태까지 나를 미행한 거야?
And Jin says, 여태까지 날 미행한 거야? 여태까지 날 미행한 거야? You can see that I'm not a good actor. 여태까지 means until now, this whole time, until this point. It's mostly the same as 지금까지, if you already know 지금까지. It's the same as that, but 여태까지 has more emphasis. Usually it's associated with a complaint or surprise.
물론. 그리고 자네가 도망갈 이유는 그것도 알고 있지.
물론. 그리고 자네가 도망가려는 것도 알고 있지. 물론 means of course, and the word 자네 is appearing here again. In fact, in this short clip, you will hear it 5 times. 도망가려는 것도 알고 있지. That G ending here is also used 3 times in this clip, and he ends his sentences like 일하고 있지, 알고 있지, 잃게 되겠지. Because this ending can emphasize assertion or certainty, and it's very dramatic here.
자네는 계획대로 남은 시계로 캘리포니아에 있는 백 회장님 친구에게 전달하고
자네는 계획대로 남은 시계를 캘리포니아에 있는 백 회장님 친구에게 전달하고. And yes, you see 자네 again here. And this whole sentence, I think, is a great example of how much the typical word order is different between Korean and English sentences. So look at the Korean sentence with the literal translation for each word in the same place. Now, let me try to vocalize that in English with Korean word order. Here we go. You plan according to that remained watches California in who is back chairman friend to deliver end. How did I do?
만약 그렇게 못하면 자네는 그녀를 잃게 되겠지.
만약 그렇게 못하면 자네는 그녀를 잃게 되겠지. 만약 그렇게 못하면, if you can't do that, and then you hear 자네 again, and then 그녀 for she, which is rarely used in spoken Korean because it's very poetic and formal. And then you hear the next one, and I love this one.
넌 자유의 몸이 아니야.
넌 자유의 몸이 아니야. What I love about it is that because of the dramatic pause between 자유의 and 몸, it ended up sounding particularly unnatural to many Koreans and people loved it. In more natural intonation, you say 몸이 아니야, like with more emphasis at the end. 자유의 몸이 아니야, 아니야, like that. But here it was 자유의 몸이 아니야. So saying it like that made it sound like you are not 몸, you're not a body. You're something else. You're a soul, you're a spirit, you're not a body. 몸이 아니야. The 자유의 part was kind of forgotten at that point. So a little more naturally, maybe you can say 넌 자유의 몸이 아니야. Like that.
여태까지 그래왔고 앞으로도 계속.
여태까지 그래왔고 앞으로도 계속. I think the translator or writer who wrote these lines likes the word 여태까지 because it appears twice here instead of commonly used 지금까지. And the actor here read 앞으로도 a little more like 앞으로도, instead of 앞으로도, which means from now on. And my guess is that maybe he was reading the Romanized line, like this, and read this part P-E-U, which is the romanization, standard romanization for or p as pu. So I'm not sure, but just my guess. And like this, if you're still relying on romanization to read Korean words, the Korean letters are really easy to learn. We have our full 1-hour course available right here on our channel, so please check it out. And that 계속 at the end is pronounced with a clear K, like that, 계속. So that's a very common mistake that many learners make, right? I am sure you've heard me explain it many times before. In Korean, you want to stop the sound at the end before you have the next following vowel, like 계속, 계속, instead of 계속. So as you can see, learning Korean doesn't just help you understand the language itself, but it lets you spot these little details, enjoy hidden jokes, and get a much deeper understanding of the content. It really adds a whole new layer of fun when you are watching shows and movies. And now I would like to hear from you. What did you think of this video? Should we turn it into a series? You decide. Let me know in the comments. And if you would like to really learn to speak Korean with a comprehensive system, please come and join us on our website at talktomeinkorean.com. We have everything you need for an enjoyable and effective learning journey. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing, and I will see you next time. 감사합니다. 안녕히 계세요.